G'day, it's Dave here, Dave Mills, with another exciting video on the DMT, the Development Momentum Theory of Chess. And we're looking at problem number 7, and we can see here that just looking at this position, you're going to have to introduce some new ideas. Okay, there's no obvious, to a lot of the earlier problems, there's no obviously loose pieces. Okay, so remember the 5 rings, the checklist, you know, king safety. Okay, the momentum of the queen coming into f2 is quite significant. You know, the queen plus the rook, it's very, very powerful. The queen's on, you know, en prise. The queen is, white queen is attacking her, and white has no loose pieces, no obviously misaligned pieces, has its own rook in the end zone, has an outpost knight, and has no obviously, you know, misaligned pieces, barrages and batteries. You know, the base pawn to the knight is defended. And white's actually very, very happy with its grip on the position. Black is holding its, a piece is defending a pawn. The bishop at e6 is defending the pawn at d5, and so it doesn't seem like any sort of obvious weakness, other than the fact that there's a great deal of momentum coming through to f2, and how can we exploit this is really the question. How can we exploit this? And the simple truth is that you want to accelerate your position here. Checks, threats, and captures. Okay, and sometimes they can be both the same thing. So you got to check the checks that could be mate. All right. So the first and the most forcing move you can do here, the move that accelerates your position the most, is obviously taking advantage of that momentum you have down the second rank, and that's queen takes f2. Queen takes f2. Now, obviously, you would think, okay, that's bad, but what's actually happened now is by capturing any pawn, you weaken the color of the pawn is sitting on. It's as simple as that. When you capture a pawn, you weaken the color it's sitting on. And so that weakens the dark squares. And that's actually the key to understanding that, remember the rule of 3. 1 piece to sacrifice, 2 to checkmate. And black actually has the bishop at h6. Don't know if you saw that banded over there, but that's actually one of the key pieces to the victory. It's the piece that cinches it, and the momentum of the queen and the rook is used to puncture through and overwhelm them. And so check the checks. They could be mate. You know, targeting the king. There's no obviously loose pieces. There's no obvious misaligned pieces. White even has a barrage, you know, with the queen and rook on the b file, and you know, looking to maybe come into the end zone with rook to b8. There's so many options that white can do here, but it's black to move, and that's time is like is the thing that you have to be aware of. The tempo, speed. Okay, white just does not have time to recover. And also, it's very important to notice how the bishop that's defending the king is on the opposite color to the bishop, the dark square bishop. So that means it favors your attack. Okay, at a simple basic point, a bishop on the light squares doesn't defend a bishop on the dark squares. So looking at this, we've got you know, queen takes f2. The only move for white, if white doesn't want to, you know, if the king moves to h1, obviously queen takes the rook and it's over. So the only move for white, like it's a forcing move, it's a move that's really accelerated your position, is to capture with the rook. And what is the weakness of that move? The weakness of the move is you can do another check. You can do another check. Okay, and the important thing here is about you getting tempo. All right, check. Now, obviously, you don't want to block with the queen. So check. But if you do want to block with the queen to slow it down, that'd be a very computer thing to do. Your rook would just capture it. But anyway, after the check, the rook pulls back, and the rook is only defended by the king. It's semi-loose. And so you check the checks. What's the most accelerating move, type 1, that you can do? Simple is, and this is to check with the bishop. Exploiting the weakness created by the absence of the pawn. Check. So we've had 3 checks in a row. Tempo, controlling the energy, controlling every tempo is an energetic thing, and it controls the game. And check is the most forcing. It has to be responded to. So queen takes f2, rook takes, rook c1 check, rook parries, and then it's the only move. After bishop to e3 is king h1, and then the rook captures. Rook on c1 captures the rook on f1. Checkmate. So it's literally like this: check, 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 checkmate. And you can see how type 1, when you have that momentum, with that, combined with that, that velocity, that direction and that speed, that tempo, it's all accelerating, a change of velocity. This acceleration, you're empowering your pieces to just smash through. Now, it's important to make a note here that in this position here, white hasn't done, doesn't have too many, minor centers of gravity. That doesn't have many things pulling black's pieces away, but has made one critical mistake, which is that the light squared bishop is a terrible defender. It can't guard the dark squares. Secondly, there's only one piece defending the back rank, and it's defended by the king, which means it's really semi-loose. So that is a weakness. So really, it's the king as a major center of gravity is creating all these weaknesses around it at f2, at f1, the rook and the pawn, they're all weak. And if you look at the momentum difference between the king and the rook guarding f2 and the queen and the rook, you can see how the momentum just overwhelms the position. It's like a car hitting a motorbike. I mean, both you may appear pretty strong, pretty sturdy, made of steel and so on, but the car's mass. Well, in this case, the value of the queen and rook is 14. And then you multiply that by the squares. In this case, it's just really one square that they're crashing through at f2 that's of concern. So let's just say the mass of 14, and then you got a rook which is the mass of the value of 5, and and the king's worth infinite or 0. So its ability to protect is insignificant. So and the fact that you've got an attacking piece on the opposite color to the bishop is absolutely devastating. And white just with type 1, it's just in this situation, it's just unstoppable. When you can get a series of checks in a row, it's like putting the foot down on the pedal. And it's just it doesn't actually matter about trading a queen for a pawn. That's irrelevant. Okay, it's I wouldn't even call it a queen sacrifice. I would just call it it's literally it's physics. It's the physics of chess. It's the development momentum theory of chess in a nutshell. And development is a change of momentum. You're creating the energy, you're impulsing your position to get the momentum, and you're trying to accelerate your position here. And you could almost say that white is like a boxer that black has jabbed him on the chin, and he's fallen back onto his heel, and then after that he can't recover because black is able to do jab after jab and punch after punch because he's on his back foot. He's lost his balance and he doesn't have the time. Black doesn't slow down at all. Each move is an acceleration. Okay, each move is forcing, and I just really tempo is actually a huge area of study. Okay, tempo is in everything. Tempo is a very, very, very important thing to understand because the force of your position is a change of momentum over a change of tempo. How does the fact is weakening that back rank, understanding that back rank is quite weak, and understanding that white's pieces just don't. What actually undoes them is this harmony and its coordination. It's an elegant example of a position that appears quiet, it appears tame, but black has a forced checkmate. All right, and so in the next audio, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that a bit more. We're going to talk about development. We're going to talk about it's not just it's not just about tempo, it's about duration of that tempo on a target. The fact is white has let black build its forces onto F2. Okay, so white should have gotten rid of that queen, and absolutely it was just white should have realized the momentum of that situation and tried to destroy that coordination. I mean, white could have. I think white could have actually played a bit better here, but was thinking, everything is protected. Everything is solid, which is the sign of you're not just creating obvious weaknesses, but really they should have paid attention to that major center of gravity around that king. And that's one of my mistakes. I'll be too focused on the center, and I'll miss something around the king sometimes because I get a bit too adventurous in my attacks. But there's a lot to take in. So next we'll talk about development. We'll talk about all sorts of wonderful things, and hopefully get to type 4 and 5 accelerations. Now, because we've covered type 1, 2, and 3, and then there's another 4 and 5 which is a little bit more advanced. All right, take care. Bye.